A touch that changed everything. The rain had been falling all morning in downtown Seattle, turning the busy streets into rivers of reflected light. Marcus Harrison stood at his corner office window on the 42nd floor, watching the city blur behind sheets of water. The glass felt cold against his fingertips as he pressed his palm against it, leaving a brief mark before the condensation erased it completely at 35. Marcus was the youngest CEO in his company's history. The tech firm he'd built from nothing now employed thousands of people across 6 countries. His name appeared on magazine covers and business journals. His success story was the kind that inspired university lectures and motivational seminars. Yet as he stood there watching the rain, Marcus felt nothing but emptiness. The intercom on his mahogany desk buzzed softly. "Mr. Harrison, your 3 o'clock meeting has been moved to 4:30, his assistant announced in her professional tone. "Thank you, Sarah," Marcus replied without turning from the window. Another meeting, another presentation, another decision that would affect hundreds of lives and millions of dollars. The weight of it all pressed down on his shoulders like a physical thing. He thought about his apartment across town. Spacious, modern, and perfectly quiet. He'd bought it for the view and the solitude. But lately, the silence felt more like isolation. His friends from college had long since stopped calling, tired of his cancelled dinner plans and postponed weekend trips. The price of success, he told himself, though the words felt hollow. The elevator ride to the lobby took exactly 93 seconds. Marcus had timed it once during a particularly boring afternoon. Everything in his life had become measurable, predictable, efficient. Even his emotions felt scheduled, appearing only during quarterly reviews or board presentations where passion was expected. The lobby of Harrison Tech buzzed with its usual afternoon energy. Employees moved purposefully between the glass doors and marble columns, their conversations mixing with the soft jazz that played from hidden speakers. Marcus walked through it all like a ghost, nodding politely at greetings but feeling disconnected from the life surrounding him. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle. The air smelled clean and fresh, washing away the city's usual, the mix of exhaust and ambition. Marcus pulled his gray overcoat tighter and began his walk to the parking garage, his leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the wet pavement. That's when he saw her. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, stood alone near the building's entrance. She wore a pink dress that had seen better days and red shoes that were slightly too big for her small feet. Her curly brown hair caught the light from the street lamps that had just begun to flicker on as evening approached. She was looking up at the tall buildings around her with wide, curious eyes. Marcus slowed his pace, concerned. Where were her parents? The street was busy with commuters heading home, but no one seemed to be looking for a missing child. He glanced around, searching for someone who might be frantically searching, calling out or showing any sign of distress. The little girl noticed him watching and smiled. It was the kind of smile that held no agenda, no expectation of anything in return, just pure, simple joy at seeing another person. Marcus found himself stopping completely, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. "Hello," she said in a voice as clear as tiny bells. "Hello," Marcus replied, crouching down to a level. The wet pavement soaked through his expensive suit pants, but he didn't care. "Are you here with someone?" She nodded toward the building behind her. "Mommy's in there talking to people about work stuff. She said it might take a while, so I came out to see the lights." She pointed up at the office building where hundreds of windows glowed like stars against the darkening sky. "The lights are beautiful," Marcus agreed, following her gaze. He'd never really noticed them before, too busy rushing between meetings and deadlines to look up. The little girl studied his face with the intense concentration that only children possess. "You look sad," she observed matter-of-factly. Marcus felt something catch in his throat. When was the last time someone had really looked at him, not at his title or his bank account or his potential usefulness, but at him? He asked, softly. She nodded seriously. "My mommy looks sad sometimes too. She works really hard, and sometimes she forgets to smile." The little girl paused, seeming to consider something important. "But smiles are contagious, you know. If you give someone a smile, they catch it and give it to someone else." Before Marcus could respond, she reached out and took his hand. Her small fingers were warm despite the cool evening air, and her touch was gentle but confident. "Mommy needs a smile," she said simply. "Maybe you could help." In that moment, something shifted inside Marcus. The child's hand in his felt like an anchor to something real and meaningful that he'd forgotten existed. Her trust, offered so freely to a stranger, reminded him of a time when the world had felt full of possibility instead of obligation. "I think I'd like that," Marcus heard himself saying. The little girl beamed, her face lighting up with pure happiness. "Come on then," she said, tugging gently at his hand. "Mummy's on the 20th floor. She's meeting with some people about her invention. She made something that helps sick people feel better, but she needs someone to believe in it." As they walked back toward his building, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, curiosity about another person's story. Not their profit margins or market projections, but their hopes and struggles and dreams. The elevator ride to the 20th floor felt different this time. The little girl chatted happily about her mother's work, her school, and her pet goldfish, named Sparkles. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Marcus found himself smiling genuinely for the first time in months. When the elevator doors opened, they revealed a woman in her early 30s pacing nervously outside the conference room. Her resemblance to the little girl was unmistakable. The same curly hair, the same bright eyes, though hers were filled with worry rather than wonder. "Emma," she called out in relief when she saw her daughter. "I was so worried when I couldn't find you. I brought help," Mommy Emma announced proudly, still holding Marcus's hand. "This is my new friend. He has a really good smile, and I think he wants to hear about your invention." The woman looked at Marcus with surprise, taking in his expensive suit and the building's logo on his visitor badge from their earlier meeting. Recognition dawned in her eyes. "Dr. Sarah Chen," she said, extending her hand. "I believe we were supposed to meet next week about funding opportunities." Marcus shook her hand, feeling Emma's small fingers still wrapped around his other one. "Marcus Harrison, and I think next week might be too late. Why don't you tell me about your work?" As Dr. Chen began to speak about her breakthrough in pain management technology, Marcus listened with an attention he hadn't given anything in years. Emma sat quietly beside them, swinging her legs from the conference room chair, occasionally adding important details about how her mummy's invention would help people like her grandmother who had ouchy bones. 2 hours later, as they finalized the funding agreement that would bring Dr. Chen's invention to market, Marcus realized that the emptiness he'd carried for so long had been replaced by something warm and purposeful. Emma had fallen asleep in her chair, her small hand still occasionally reaching out as if to make sure he was still there. "She has a gift," Dr. Chen said softly, watching her daughter sleep. "She sees people, really sees them. I've been so focused on my research that I forgot there are still people in the world who lead with their hearts." Marcus nodded, understanding completely. "She reminded me of something I'd lost," he said. "Sometimes it takes a child to show us what really matters." As they prepared to leave, Emma woke up and smiled sleepily at Marcus. "Did Mummy get her smile back?" she asked, looking at Dr. Chen's radiant face as she clutched a signed contract. Marcus grinned. "I think she did. And so did I." The little girl clapped her hands together in delight. "I told you smiles were contagious." Walking them to the elevator, Marcus felt lighter than he had in years. Tomorrow, he would call his old college friends. He would take that weekend trip he'd been postponing. He would remember to look up at the lights and find reasons to smile. But most importantly, he would remember the lesson a 4-year-old had taught him, that sometimes the most important meetings aren't on any calendar. And the most valuable connections happen when we simply reach out our hand to another person who needs to know they're not alone. As the elevator doors closed, Emma waved goodbye, her small hand pressed against the glass. Marcus waved back, already planning the scholarship fund he would establish in her name, one that would support young inventors and dreamers who just needed someone to believe in their vision. The touch of a little girl's hand had changed everything, reminding him that success without connection was just expensive loneliness, and that the best leaders are often the ones who remember to see the world through a child's eyes, full of wonder and possibility and hope.